Hey guys, Grumpy here with a quick guide to carriers. In this guide, we're going to go over what are carriers, we're going to talk about the three different types of fighters, and then we're going to go over the officer skills and hull mods that affect carriers and fighters. So what are carriers? Carriers are unique modified ships. They are designed to carry these small little crafts that are flying around our legion right now. These are the fighters. They have a unique mechanic that revolves around replacement rate. So you see down here, replacement rate 100%. As you lose ships to combat, it'll take longer and longer to replace them. So your replacement rate will degrade. Now, in order to increase your replacement rate so you make sure that you have a nice healthy supply of fighters, you want to break away from combat, let it build back up, and then go back into the fight. There's also finally the Z key by default. This is going to toggle between engage and regroup. So when you set to engage, your ships will fly out, find whatever the nearest target is, and attack them. And then regroup will call them back to your ship. If you have a really low replacement rate, what you want to do is you want to regroup and then back away from combat. This will give your fighters time to breathe and then replace themselves. Then you can go in fresh to the fight. Right. So now let's go over the fighters themselves. So there are three different types of fighters. There are interceptors, fighters, which I'll refer to as strike craft for the sake of clarity, and then bombers. So starting off with interceptors, interceptors can generally be categorized as extremely fast ships. They have really large pack sizes, so they like to swarm their targets. And they're equipped with laser and fragmentation weaponry so that they can cut through missiles and other fighters. If you're running a defensive setup, you really want, or you want supplemental point defense, you really want to include interceptors in your fleet. So moving on from there, we have fighters, which I'll call strike craft. Strike craft are very varied. They serve a ton of different roles, but the best way to categorize them would be middling speed, very strong weaponry, can overwhelm frigates easily, and can down some destroyers. They help to supplement your DPS or give you an advantage on the battlefield. Play with these. They're very varied. Find the ones you like. I'm partial to broadswords as well. They provide nice kinetic damage. But everyone has their own favorite, so you just have to experiment with it. And then finally, there are bombers. Bombers are probably king of the fighters. They are the most expensive for a very good reason. They provide unlimited missiles in combat, which, like, you've seen the missile guide, and you know how much I sing missile praises. It can't be overstated how valuable having unlimited missiles in combat is. So to reflect that, they have very high ordnance point costs, and the pack sizes are very small. Usually you'll see 2 to 3 at most. The weaker missiles get more fighters, but the stronger the missile is, for example, like this Cobra bomber carries a Reaper missile inside of it, you only get 1 in the pack. So you do need to keep that in mind. But yeah, probably some of your best carriers are going to be either one strike craft and all bombers, if not just all bombers. So moving on from there, let's go over the officer skills. Unfortunately, there's not too much support for carriers from the tree itself. You have leadership, which provides carrier group. This just increases your fighter replacement rate. It's faster if you have officers, but it is limited to 8 bays. So looking at the fleet, a legion by itself carries 4 bays, so you're already consuming half of your bays allotted. Astral carries 6, and then a Heron and a Mora, they carry 3 apiece. So you can very quickly exceed the total amount of bays allotted to you. And then you have fighter uplink. So fighter uplink reduces the amount of crew loss due to fighters. If you do run a carrier fleet, carriers do require a lot of crew to maintain, but also they suffer a lot of losses. So when you take hull damage to your carriers, you're going to lose a lot more crew proportional to something like an enforcer or um, like a champion, something like that, because you just have more bodies in that ship. So, but this does make your fighters more accurate, and it does give them a little bit more top speed. Again, you're reduced to 8 bays, so it's very punishing once you go above that. You have your point defense. Point defense applies to fighters from the piloted ship as well. So if you are piloting a ship and you have fighters in your ship, then this buff will also apply to them. So if you're running interceptors on a with this point defense, this is really good if your ship ever gets overloaded because your fighters can still shoot down incoming missiles, which is a very common tactic that the enemy likes to use. So if you're overloaded and you have point defense, then you can still survive kind of a missile barrage if you're running those interceptor drones. And then finally, not much going on in industry, but the reason I highlighted this was because of containment procedures. So you can take less crew losses due to hull damage, so this, as well as derelict operations. So unfortunately, carriers have a really high deployment point cost. If you run a junk fleet with a lot of demods, you can lower the deployment costs of those ships so you can get out more carriers. Alright, so finally let's talk about hull mods. There aren't that many hull mods that affect carriers, but the ones that we do have are pretty impactful. So first we have expanded deck crew. This is going to increase the crew requirement for your fighter bays, but at the same time it's going to make your replacement rate better. It's going to decay slower and then replenish quicker. Then you have recovery shuttles. So this just simply reduces the amount of crew that you lose through combat. And then you have defensive targeting array, which is a newer addition. It's pretty recent. But what it does is it gives you increased fighter power, which is really nice, but restricts them to being basically stuck to your ship. So they'll no longer engage. Then we have converted hangar. Converted hangar adds a fighter bay. Take longer to replenish your ships, which I think is totally fine. It also increases the deployment point costs as well as the crew requirement for your ship. And then finally you have converted fighter bay, which does the opposite. Normally ships like Shepherds have inbuilt fighter bays, so you can't modify this. But if you use converted fighter bay, it'll convert those fighter bays into additional cargo space. So that's it. That's all when it comes to fighters and carriers. I really enjoy carriers. I know they get spoken down a lot about, but if you go like in an all-in strategy and you just do all-in on carriers, it can be really devastating. Especially if you pair them with like really strong missiles, right, where your fighters are overwhelming the enemy's point defense and those missiles are piercing through. Go fight the Persians. If you truly want to understand the power of a good carrier group, have fun fighting the Persians. They will educate you more so than this guide will. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Other than that, Grumpy out.